is Enuma Elish. Um, and Phil Langdon is from London, that is, today. And so we'll let him talk a little bit about himself today and share a little bit. Okay. Thank you, Phil.
Hi, thanks, Brian. Hi, my name's Phil Langdon. I'm from London. I'm 54 now, so I'm getting old.
Okay, I'm 65.
I'm currently formatting a book about the Enuma Elish. So it's steady going. I've basically had preliminary notes that I'm starting to put into a book form, so we can look at the first portion of the Enuma Elish, certainly, and get the immediate comparison to other myths that came afterwards.
Is this the first, basically, in the Western world? Maybe, yeah, the Western world, considered, because this took place in Mesopotamia, right? That area.
Yeah, I mean, this particular book goes back nearly 4,000 years, if not longer. It's thought to come from a Sumerian poem originally, whose age is unknown. It's several thousand years ago,
Okay.
Probably 5,000 years ago or so. But the Enuma Elish was compiled nearly 4,000 years ago, around, just after 2000 BC.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's very old.
Yeah, it's very old. So it's approximately 6,000 years old, if that's correct, the time factor. So, but who knows?
Possibly, yeah.
So, is this? I'm going to ask you another quick question, real quick. Is this where the Egyptians got some of their writings from? That is, they took from these others and brought it into their particular. They created their own characters here.
Yeah, it's obviously that's what's going on. It's very obvious that that's what's going on, and I think the reason for that is because once somebody in the world finds deep insight and truth, there's nothing to change.
Correct.
If you see what I mean. There's no need to. There's no need to write something completely new. It's going to be the same every time, and every time a culture gets it, they write their own version of the same issues.
Right. Because then they so my theory simply is, did the Egyptians borrow this information and just simply formatted it, so to speak, for their own age at that time for themselves?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I noticed it simply when I was reading some of it last night, if I'm correct. A lot. Words, I would say 7 came up quite a bit, many times, as well as I recollect.
Right.
And
there are 7. The Enuma Elish is 7 tablets.
Right. They have certain characters here. There are 7 coats of armor they talk about. Is what I get. No, is that right? Maybe I'm wrong. They talk about. Well, they're different people. Maybe we should talk about them also. But then anyway, you know more about it than I do. So I wrote the names of some of these particular characters. Uruk, Shamahat, the harlot, Anuk, A-N-U, Inkaduk. So there are other ones also. The main character, I forgot to write him down, but he was a young guy. Anyway, I'll stop talking and you can explain what I'm sharing. Maybe I'm off course today, so to speak.
No, that's all right. So maybe I should read through my notes and take you through the first portion, because the very first portion is akin to Genesis, the book of Genesis.
Okay.
And if we compare it to Genesis, in Genesis, the first chapter, we go through the 7 hermetic principles.
Right.
And prior to that, you had the myth of Heliopolis, which was a delineation of the elements of what's called the tree of life, which has 10 points.
Correct.
But those 10 points are in 4 sections. You can break the tree of life down with its 10 points into 4. And if you count... Sorry.
I was thinking of something that one side of the tree is like 5, and then the 5 on the other one. Is that right? Or not right?
Sorry, one side of the tree is what?
Like one would be what I would call the male principle, 5 parts, and then the female principle is 5 parts. Or am I incorrect there?
Well, you can break it down like that, but you want to stick to the philosophy before you start going around with male and female with principles and stuff like that. It comes from a basic philosophy that you have 1 and 2 in a relationship, or singularity and duality in a relationship. And duality is physical nature, but singularity is spiritual nature.
Spiritual, right.
Right. So when they interact, there's a process and there's a refinement. That is a unification of the two. That process is the process in nature. When you plant a seed in the ground, it grows a tree that makes more seeds. It's the same. It's the same philosophical principle, and it's encoded in the tree of life. So we have 10 points, and they're in 4 sections. If we count down the 4 sections, we can count back up from the 4th at the bottom. And we literally count 7 steps by doing so. And in so doing, we have 7 tablets in the Enuma Elish, because they really are a delineation of this process. And the process sees redemption, or salvation, as it's called in Christianity. But salvation isn't one of the most ancient concepts in the human race, because we've always known about it. It's just been redressed every time you have a new culture. They redress it in their own terms. That's all.
Right.
But the truth is always just true, So, and every culture ends up finding it, and they commemorate it in their own way. So, at the time of the Enuma Elish, the commemoration that obviously would have been handed to initiates in mystery schools was the Enuma Elish, which is a story of redemption. I mean, it's comparable in a way to the Cain and Abel story as well. It's directly comparable to the myth of Heliopolis in Egypt, which is the next historical version that I can find. There's a major recording that we still have fully intact. And the fact that the myth of Heliopolis is intact from start to finish means we can easily interpret the Enuma Elish as well. We also have Genesis today, which is more than 2,000 years old, the book of Genesis. And that's the very first portion of it, the first chapter, is again another version of the Enuma Elish. But it's more refined. It's a slightly more developed form. See, so the word Enuma Elish actually means when on high, and you have to ask yourself, what does it mean to be high? I mean, are they talking about drugs? Are they talking about intoxication? Because the meaning of words change. But no, they're talking about looking from the top of a mountain, effectively, or when on high can be compared to the flight of a bird.
Right.
Because birds can fly pretty high and they get a bird's eye view, and that's what you get from the top of the mountain. So there's a connection between bird's eye views and being at the mountaintop with God. You see, so the idea of being on high is telling you about redemption, in fact, because redemption puts you at the top of the mountain, metaphorically, spiritually.
Yes.
See?
So I was going to say something that most of the quote unquote the birds that actually fly higher are eyes. They have good eyes. Okay.
Yeah. That's right.
And so when they have good eyes in what they do, most are unaware of this. Well, maybe they are. That they see another particular another creature on the ground or whatever, and choose to pursue it, and then eventually trap it and kill it. And what they do, they pursue what they call, the first thing they go after is to do with the eyes itself. They eat the eyes because I don't know if you know that, you probably do, but maybe the other people don't know that, and they leave the rest. They do eat some other things, but that is what they're after, because they know they fly so high up there. They need their vision to be able to, quote unquote, to live. So anyway, I'm kind of off the subject, so to speak, but I don't want to explain why that happens. So
yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, sure. So most of the Egyptian gods or characters in the classic Ennead, it's called the Ennead, meaning 9, a group of 9. And the 9 are the first 9 points on the tree of life. All except the very last point, which is the 10th, which is personified by someone called Horus in the Egyptian myth. But in the Enuma Elish, it's the hero, the one who finds redemption. In the Enuma Elish, it's somebody called Marduk. When you look up these names, it's not the same as when you look up biblical names that are Jewish. These Babylonian names are very etymological. You need to type in the etymological, the word etymology you need to use when you look up these words, because they're very old, very old. Okay. So Marduk, hang on, Marduk has a certain meaning. Let me quickly find it. Yeah, I won't be a second. There's quite a lot of it. Where is he? Well, here's a. Oh, here it is. Yeah, bull calf of Utu. Marduk means bull calf of Utu, and Utu has something to do with the sun. Another name for Marduk is Bel, B-E-L. Notice the word El in that word, E-L, like Raphael, Uriel, Gabriel. El means God.
Right.
So Bel means Lord. There's a lot of talk about these things across the internet, as it were, especially on YouTube, where people want to get views and become someone who claims to know that there's lots of evil embedded in Babylon and all this sort of thing. I've heard this so many times.
Right.
It really is really bad misunderstanding. So Marduk was seen by many as the god of creation and the patron god of the city of Babylon. Babylon actually refers to the cloud of heaven directly.
Right, that's the meaning of the word Babylon.
Babylon refers to the cloud of heaven, yeah.
Right. The sad part, most people don't understand it. They see it as a negative Babylon.
That's because of the book of Revelation, it talks about the whore of Babylon, etc. The fall of Babylon, etc., etc. But that's really we don't realize that in the ancient world they were talking about the creative principle, the cloud of heaven, as the creative principle. In those terms, it can be spoken of as evil because it's only made a physical system. In other words, it can't make anything spiritual. So,
this whole idea simply is that people have a hard time. They don't understand these myths are revealing the the physical, which is what we have ourselves, and somehow we're considered that even the scriptures itself, the Bible considers even the body is evil, so to speak. Which we talked a little bit about that. But the body is just a mechanism for us to, quote unquote, to be here on this planet. Yeah. It's just a way for us to live. It's a way, as a container, so to speak, and that actually, to quote unquote, what's the word? So you can actually no longer reincarnate here again. It's used for reincarnation in reality, correct?
Yeah, it's a means to the end of generating heaven for yourself.
Right, salvation. That's why we're here, is in order for us to have salvation. But we have to.
That's right.
It's a stumbling block for most people because simply it's the body, because we also know, as me and you know, we have to work. We have to physically work to make money in order to, quote unquote, to what I would call simply to live here. But in reality, simply is we have a higher objective, is to, quote unquote, to become angels, to pursue that.
Yeah. So there's a man-made function of being a human, the money thing. You have to make money to live and survive. That's just man-made. I mean, the God-made thing is the idea that your body, even though it's given to you, it's still a beast you have to learn to ride, because it has its own ideas. And the fact that it's unfettered, it's a creation that can cause chaos if it so chooses, that is considered to be demonic and evil in the first place. You see, so it's the unfettered nature of the automatic features of what's physical that is considered to be evil. That's all. It's just a way of looking at things. Your body wants to do this. It wants to eat. Therefore, it has to destroy something to eat.
Right.
You know, it wants to procreate. It wants to impose its will around. It wants to impose its own control so that it's not insecure, etc., etc. There's a whole list of things concerning the physical nature of being. And that's really the source of, well, you know, this idea of something being evil. So going back to Marduk, he was also seen as the Babylonian god of justice, compassion, healing, and magic, and is sometimes referred to as a god of thunderstorms and agriculture. That's a really wide spread of ideas.
That's
just
a
for
whole
one
gamut.
person. Yeah, Marduk is really like very much like Enoch as well. You're not sure whether you're being told about the cloud, you know, as the conquering issue overall in terms of salvation, or the person, the angel who is redeemed. It's often amalgamated into one personification, this whole issue, and that's certainly the case in the Enuma Elish with Marduk. He basically isn't a Babylonian version of Enoch. It's the same concept, same idea, as if he's a conquering hero. Right. The etymology for the name Marduk is generally understood to be derived from Damar Utu Ak, meaning bull calf of Utu. The title Babylon refers us directly to the cloud as the home of angels. Marduk was commonly called Bel, as we've mentioned already, Bel, which means Lord in the first millennium BC. So let me just quickly, I just want to read you a summary here, which is basically my notes.
Okay.
Excuse me. Most of the Egyptian gods or characters in the classic Ennead are directly comparable with Babylonian counterparts in the Enuma Elish. However, there are some Egyptian figures that represent separated forms of earlier, more composite characters, such as Lord Ea, known as Enki, who became two figures in ancient Egypt. One was Osiris, that took on the kingship role, and the idea of the angel, you know, being the conqueror, known as the King of Kings, which is a title referring to the cloud. So once again, Osiris is a composite figure himself, like Enoch. Right. We can compare Osiris to Enoch easily. And Thoth, the other figure is Thoth, who is not a real person in any history. He's a personification of wisdom itself, very much like Sophia. But Sophia is the feminine personification with the association to an angel, whereas Thoth is more of an intellectual personification of wisdom itself, regardless of gender. Thoth, of course, is a figure that personifies wisdom associated with divinity and kingship itself. So there's a link between Osiris and Thoth. Okay. We can likewise map Osiris onto King Arthur as a later characterization, and Merlin the Magi, or the wizard, as Thoth. You see, so the Egyptian breakdown of Lord Ea, or Enki, becomes Osiris and Thoth in Egypt, but in northern France, in the 12th century AD, when the King Arthur story was written, we have King Arthur and Merlin as two separated personifications or characters that in fact both represent the angel. So you have the idea that the angel is a king, and they have the wisdom of the oracle, as it were, right, available to them directly, you know. Right. It's like having the source of all knowledge walking around with you that you can just ask questions to all the time.
Right. It's in their head. It's not on a piece of paper, so to speak. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not actually a separate person. It's a personification of their wisdom, right? Of their anointing. That's what's going on. So the story of the Enuma Elish concerns divine glorification or salvation when we think theatrically. When we think mathematically, however, we see the pattern of the classic tree of life that has 10 points of interest, personified as the gods of the creation story. So as we go through the first tablet, you get a delineation of the tree of life, which is equivalent to the myth of Heliopolis and equivalent to the book of Genesis in the first chapter, which tells us about the 7 kingdoms. In fact, the 7 hermetic principles, it follows Genesis. The reader may be aware in ancient Egypt, the gods were referred to as the Ennead, meaning group of 9, one short of 10, in other words. The 10th position goes to the hero of the piece, known as Horus or Heru, which means hero literally, and relates to our struggle through life, its mysteries, and how we overcome the indifference of it all, personified by a falcon-headed figure when we do overcome it in salvation. Right. So we become Horus in the Egyptian metaphor. The falcon head is associative and refers us to the bird-like quality of flight, to get really, really high. And when on high, we have a bird's eye view of the entirety. So here's the reason for the Enuma Elish being called the Enuma Elish. It means when on high. So it's really about redemption and salvation, the Enuma Elish, not aliens and visitation or anything like that.
Yeah.
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 So, I mean, thinking like this as if viewing from the top of a mountain becomes a testament written by any initiate who becomes a qualified angel, characterized as Marduk in ancient Babylon or Horus in ancient Egypt, privy to the divine scene at the beginning of time, which is what everything is about when it comes to divine scripture. The scene that acts as the catalyst for seeing clearly, which in French is clairvoyance, which doesn't mean you can see the future. It means you have clear sight. It means you understand very clearly, to a refined definition, the nature of reality. In the most personal subjective sense, an experience akin to a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, or a hero proving their worth and being recognized in exaltation that we find in the Enuma Elish. We find this quality in the Enuma Elish when Marduk, the hero of the piece, slays the great dragon Tiamat, like St. George in more modern times, and is exalted from then on to the end of the 7 tablets. And the interesting thing structurally and mathematically about the 7 tablets is that the main event is in the 4th one, and that's right in the middle. So the first 3 are introducing our characters, the nature of creation, to tell you that creation has to be overcome. And it's overcome in chapter 4, so that the last 3 chapters are reserved for exalting the fact that this has been done. And what you see there is metaphysics of Alpha and Omega. Metaphysics is 3 and 1. There's 3 aspects to spirit, and 1 that unifies them all with the physical quality, which is the cloud of heaven, the Son of God. So 3 and 1 is there at the beginning of the 7 tablets. The first 3 introduces everyone and fills us in with the picture. The one in the middle changes everything. Just like Jesus is in the middle of the apostles at the Last Supper in the Da Vinci painting. He's right in the middle where everything changes and redemption occurs. And now you have 3 tablets that are going to exalt this transformation. And that's now 1 and 3, which is the reverse of the beginning. So you have Alpha and Omega in the Enuma Elish, you see, encoded numerically, as it were, by having 7. It's basically telling you about the tree of life as the natural philosophy. So to convey this personal transformative issue, more commonly and later known in Christianity as salvation, we must immerse ourselves in the work and endeavor of the schools of old and find out what held their interest before we can hope to appreciate the contents of the Enuma Elish without pretending an answer. So I've put 3 chapters of previous stuff that I've published before to help somebody in this book about the Enuma Elish, to help somebody develop their understanding of why things are being said in Enuma Elish at the end. So the Enuma Elish is the last chapter in this book. And I think it might be a good idea to go straight to the beginning of it and have a comparison between the myth of Heliopolis and the Enuma Elish in its first tablet.
Let me interject something here. So
yeah,
you know as well, I don't know, most people don't realize it in some ways. Myths in reality even conveyed even 200 or 300 years ago, whatever, such and such, even children's myths, such and such. or in reality trying to express truth, but it's hidden. It's hidden for a purpose because most people see the literal interpretation of anything and think, well, these people must be nuts, or they're just simply discard it because they say, why they come up with these weird names or whatever? Because what happens simply is they're turned off by this because simply, well, why isn't it in English? Something of that nature. Why isn't it in my language or whatever? That basically in some ways means the person is not really interested in that. He's not ready, and it doesn't mean it's not mean to be hard. It's just simply that's reality.
Don't forget these were made for initiates in mystery schools, not regular people on the street.
All right, then I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And
nowadays people talk about this material as if it has nothing to do with mystery schools, as if we're all just supposed to understand it. And if it's not immediately understandable, there's something wrong with it, and it's old-fashioned, and it's no.
So they throw it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But if it's all metaphor and we don't know what the metaphor is referring to, we've got nothing as a reference.
So here we go again with the literal interpretation. No matter what, we live in this age that basically everything is literal. It's supposed to be literal, and the reality simply is you don't understand. Simply is that it's not supposed to be literal.
Yeah, everything's left. It's referred to as being left-brained in the modern day. Yeah, but in the ancient world they were right-brained, and angels are effectively right-brained. So they talk in riddles and metaphors on purpose because it contains information.
So that that makes sense because
it tells you more than the words being used. Put it that way.
Right.
Yeah, that's very much like that. So let me introduce you to these different characters. So in Egypt, we began with the myth of Heliopolis. With a character called a composite deity called Atum Ra.
Yes.
The composite deity suggesting a logical unification of dual opposites as a starting point for creative expansion, because salvation in personal terms actually generates the objective spark of creation according to these texts. According to that event that is referred to as salvation, that is the beginning of creation as well. So it's the alpha, it's the omega for you personally, but the alpha impersonally or objectively. So we have a link between subjective and objective at this point. Creation comes from ascension or salvation, in other words, apparently. The first figures of the Enuma Elish are Tiamat and Abzu. Notice there are two characters, just like Atum Ra is two characters, a composite, unified together. So also denoting the issues of the primordial state at zero. They represent the abyss, that's Tiamat, and the cloud respectively. So Abzu is specifically the cloud.
Okay.
And at this point, we're not talking about anything being created. We're simply identifying what there is at zero, which is the salvation moment. It's a timeless moment, so it's zero time. In this sense, Atum correlates with Abzu and Ra. So Ra in Egypt is Ra. Ra is a reference to becoming the sun god, because in Egypt you had the Sphinx staring out to the east, waiting for the rising sun. And if the Sphinx represents the cloud, the rising sun is now the risen angel who is in front of the cloud in their salvation. So that commemoration, the equinox, which unifies day and night with 12 hours each, so they're both equal. On the morning of equinox, you have a commemoration of salvation. And Ra, of course, is the sun god, the idea of the sun god. When you ascend, it's very quick and sudden. So they say Ra, you see. So it's like Yahweh. It's exactly the same principle as Yahweh, which refers to literal ascension.
That's also even in the costumes with the headdress of the pharaoh.
The pharaoh, that's right.
You have
that's right. The golden beams and his golden face literally represent the face of God.
Right.
Yeah, it's to say this is anointing. yeah,
Right.
with the cloud of heaven.
Right.
So Ra is effectively the abyss, and correlates with Tiamat. But notice Atum Ra is all male. It's very
Yes.
male. Yes, it's very. There's nothing feminine going on about it whatsoever. But in the myth, they talk about Atum being male and female at once, even though we think of Atum as a male.
Right.
Here, Tiamat is a great female, which is more traditional.
Oh.
So the abyss is like a big womb, which you associate with female, who's giving birth. So the abyss in Babylon was originally feminine. The great bottomless ocean, in comparison to the natural oceans of the world, we find it's the connection to it is the connection to ocean salt water that's applied to the figure personified known as Tiamat. So Tiamat is referred to as salt water, and notice the word water is being used in association.
Right.
Abzu, the cloud, is also a kind of water, but he is fresh water.
I was going to say he's going to be fresh. It would be
Yeah. The waters of life is refined water, if you like.
Right.
So it's purified.
It's purified. Right. It's
Yeah, no longer salty. So Abzu technically is a purification of Tiamat.
Okay,
But
that
at
makes
the moment,
sense.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That reveals in some ways when you talk about the salty water, meaning there's something wrong, and when the purity would be the pure water, meaning simply is that it's been cleansed. It's
clean.
now,
Yeah.
right. Would be that he's anointed in a way.
Right. But Tiamat is referred to as a dragon, which is very difficult to comprehend. There's a couple of ways of explaining that. One is that the abyss is referred to as the fifth element, or an aspect of the fifth element. The fifth element is really the cloud, but the cloud comes with the abyss. You can't have one without the other. So they're synonymous with each other. And of course, you could call the abyss ether. It's normally referred to as ether because it's a zero-dimensional state. So you don't know what to call it. So we call it ether.
Right.
It's very ancient calling it ether. As a result, you can think of it as the four elements together as the fifth. And of course, a dragon personifies the four elements unified into one.
Right.
Because it has talons that grip the earth. It has a reference to every element in it. Talons grip the earth.
As wings,
it has scales like fish that swim in water. It has wings to fly through the air, and it breathes fire. So you have earth, water, air, and fire with the dragon. So Tiamat is referred to as a dragon because we're in an initial state, a primordial state before creation. So there's no intelligence as of yet. It's rough and ready. It's like a...
Yeah, I was going to say simply again, this is how people misunderstand even the book of Revelations, which you've done before, and they get confused with a dragon and think it's a literal dragon. It's going to be, such and such, or it's going to be a whore on top of whatever the dragon, so to speak. And they're trying to picture this and they're trying to do this and that. And it's like, especially the church. That's part of what I was talking about earlier when we were sharing something is that many people think that, we're going to quote unquote have a reset, so to speak. That's what I get the indication people keep thinking that. Because I think a lot of times the people borrow things from the Bible, wherever they get them from, and then try to fit a square into a quote unquote a circle, so to speak, and it doesn't fit. The whole idea simply is that God goes around and kills people, quote unquote, commands his people to kill people in the Old Testament. That doesn't square. It's not there. But that's right. What people choose to look at literally. See, there's no longer what I would call, they're not teaching what I would call, they used to teach something back long ago when I was in school, which I didn't take it, was mythology. They taught mythology back then. Now we go back to what we call the days doing the Danish or the people. No, I'm trying to think of the names of them. Swedes and all these people had their own mythology also.
Odin and all that sort of thing. The northern mythos. Yeah.
Right. But what I'm trying to say simply is, you can see how. And this is, I think, was with a guy named Campbell. Is that correct? His last name?
Joseph Campbell.
Yes, Joseph Campbell talked about myth also.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't know how good his book is, such and such. I'm just saying.
Good. It's very good. It's very good. Yeah, he's very astute, very intellectually astute, Joseph
He's
Campbell.
probably the only one that basically can actually look up to with some kind of respect in our modern age dealing with myths.
Yeah, and you can see the source of religious material in what he talks about when it comes to myth, without a doubt. You can see the connections and the correlations.
But he didn't come to that. But he didn't come to that connection, though, did he?
Well, to some extent he did, but I mean, people obviously don't take it too seriously because they like the idea that Jesus Christ is a specific person that you either believe in or you don't, and all other religions are false and wrong because they don't respect Jesus, etc.
Because we live in a day of quote unquote of Christianity. In other words, it's been accepted by the world, so to speak.
Yeah, it's easy to push on people, that one, because there's a personification that you can relate to some extent.
Yes,
and it's very nice.
It's easy to swallow, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. So with 7 tablets, the tablet 1 is the beginning at 0, and the system of creation. We're going to go quickly through that makes creatures with intellect who struggle in life, reminiscent of the opening verse of Genesis. Tablet 2 is about calling Marduk the hero who can overcome the great dragon Tiamat and the turmoil. Tablet 3 sees the awareness of Marduk and his plan to overcome Tiamat grow amongst those whom it concerns. Tablet 4 is the middle of the 7 and the main event where he actually overcomes Tiamat. It sees Marduk battle and overcome Tiamat. Spiritual nature overcomes physical nature, effectively, and heaven is established as a temple in metaphor. Then tablet 5 to 7 just sees Marduk established as King of Kings like Jesus Christ and establishes heaven and creation in his order as the Alpha and Omega. He's the great king of all above and below. And tablet 7 is about the exaltation of Marduk again and his highest kingship position as a great redeemer and creator of all. So it's really primordial to completion, the Enuma Elish, in a very short space of time. So it's really just a summary of existence, this book, as it were, in our terms. This is what concerns us as human beings. Okay, let's dive in, actually, because tablet 1 is here, and you'll instantly recognize the book of Genesis in the first 2 lines, which says, when the heavens above did not exist and earth beneath had not come into being. Well, in Genesis, it says, now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Nothing had been created yet. So you're at 0. They're literally telling you the same thing in Genesis and the Enuma Elish. Nothing been created yet. We're at 0, in other words. But at 0, there was Apsu, which is the cloud, the first in order, their begetter, because the firstborn is the cloud from the expansion of the abyss. And line 4, and demiurge. Notice it calls Tiamat the demiurge, which is the cloud. The cloud is like the head of a great big snake, and the snake is the rest of creation. The 7 hermetic principles in full you can think of as a great serpent whose head is the creator. And because he's ignorant, he's considered to be an evil serpent, and he's identified in ancient Egypt as Apep. In this case, it's Tiamat. And demiurge Tiamat, she really is the abyss, but the abyss contains the cloud as its creative principle, who gave birth to them all. So in that 3rd line, it says there was Apsu, the first in order, their begetter, which sounds like a contradiction to the next line that says, and demiurge Tiamat, who gave birth to them all. Well, they can't both be first. Yes, they can, in their own way. With the expansion of the abyss, the first appearance is the cloud. So the abyss is first and the cloud is first in their own terms. And then it says in line 5, they had mingled their waters together. Water is the issue at 0. So the abyss is the bottomless ocean, akin to our oceans, the open oceans of salt water. And the cloud is now fresh water. So they're mingling their waters. And in tradition, water refers to truth, the idea of truth, because this is the truth with flesh, don't forget, in Christianity.
Could we
Absu.
say that with the cloud and the salty water, that eventually it purifies the salty water that is being impure, or is it two separate?
As mentioned before, I mean, the cloud is really thought of as the purification of the abyss.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, so you've got the two extreme ends of the same thing. The
Right,
abyss is the primordial state, but the cloud is the finished state, the perfected state.
right.
The reader may be accustomed by now to the connection between water and truth of the divine nature. The first presented figures of the Enuma Elish are the watery personas of both the cloud and the abyss it came from, who mingle and mix their waters at the zero condition before time began, because we're at time zero here. Before Meadowland had coalesced and reedbed was to be found, when not one of the gods had been formed, or had come into being, when no destinies had been decreed yet. The gods were created within them. So here is the source of everything at zero.
Right.
And the first two gods that it's going to mention are Lamu and Laamu, were formed and came into being. Now, these two gods are exactly equivalent to Shu and Tefnut in the Egyptian myth of Heliopolis.
Okay.
Shu and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut are Greek names for these original gods. They have older Egyptian names, but I'm going to stick with the Greek because that's what we know mostly.
Okay.
And Shu is the noise you make when you sneeze.
Achoo.
Shu. See, and when you sneeze, there's a very fast wind, and that speed of that wind is akin to the opening of the abyss when you ascend. Is correlated to that. So air is the element associated with the expansion of the abyss, and air is a wind. So to commemorate that, they refer to it as Shu.
Sure.
And you have to ask yourself, hang on a minute, I thought you told us that Tiamat and Abzu were the abyss and the cloud, and now they're saying something else has been created that surely should be different. No, what they're doing is telling you, first of all, about the condition at zero by itself. And on its own, they're personifying the two issues of the abyss and the cloud as Tiamat and Abzu. Nothing about creation yet. Now that they want to discuss creation, they're going to talk about the same things in creative terms. And in so doing, they're going to rename those same things. So now Tiamat and Abzu are now Lamu and Lahamu.
Okay.
They're the same. They're the same. But now Lamu and Lahamu are the creative aspects of that condition. See, so all they're doing is distinguishing between zero to make sure you understand that zero is zero. It's unique. If we compare with the breakdown of the tree of life on those four levels, it corresponds to the top, which is singular or singularity or spirit nature. And it is metaphysics. So it is spirit nature by itself. So they're going to delineate the tree of life. And that first one is just alone, spirit on its own, as it were. The second level is going to be correlating with Shu and Tefnut, because now the cloud is the creative principle. Okay.
So they working their way down is what you're saying. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. All you have to do is
working their way up.
Yeah, follow the tree of life. Start at the top, you go down 4 steps.
Right. So they're coming from the top down, and we've been talking about in the past is simply working our way up in a way that it's like steps, such and such. So
from the human condition, you work your way back up to the spiritual nature at the top. Yeah, that's right. But here we're talking about the creation of physical nature in the first place. So there we have our first two gods. By the way, Tefnut. Nut means sky, and Tef is moisture. So the moisture of the sky is rain. So these two gods, Shu and Tefnut, are wind and rain, or wind and water, or air and water as two elements. See? And water, of course, Tefnut is the cloud. But Tefnut is the creative aspect of the cloud as the creative principle. It says, when you look it up, that usually Lamu and Laamu represent silt, but in some texts they seem to take the form of serpents. And because the wavy line of a gliding snake is similar to the ripple of water, some scholars believe that Lamu and La'amu may have only been synonyms of Tiamat. You see, so that they're recognizing that the Lamu, these first two gods produced, are basically the same as what was previously there. It's just renaming what's already there to say, well, now we're going to look at it in creative terms. Okay. So yeah, this new dual designation refers us to zero as a creative state. And the condition takes on new names to highlight this shift of perception. Shu is the abyss, like Tiamat, and Tefnut is the cloud, but as creative identities instead of just the primary issues alone. This way of proceeding follows the tree of life and its associations. The first level is spiritual and singular, associated with the head and the element air when applied to the human body. The next level down is still within the metaphysical limit, but now focuses on the seeming contradictory dual nature of singularity as zero and infinity. So we think of these zero and infinity as completely different and opposite and nothing to do with each other, when in fact they are one and the same.
Right.
They are two aspects of the same thing. A zero dimension, if you are perceiving zero dimension, it will appear as an infinite expanse. See, that there's no distinction in it whatsoever. They are equivalent and akin to each other. They are one and the same. It's just a question of perception. So we're always dealing with the perceiver when we're talking about these concepts. What are we perceiving? Is there an object? Is there an observation of anything? Well, in the abyss, your observation is that it is infinite, when in fact it's a zero-dimensional condition. Zero, meaning it has no physical size. So how can it be an infinite expanse? Well, it depends on your point of view, because in these physical terms, when we say a zero-dimensional identity, we're talking about a singularity that has no physical size. But when you're in the opposite sense, the spiritual sense is the exact opposite. So now zero dimension is infinite. Okay, there's that distinction with the observer. And it's doing that as if highlighting the creative function and the potential range that singularity has already between zero and infinity. That's the potential behind the expansiveness of what comes after. The third level is now 3 and creative physically, governed by Geb and Nut in the myth of Heliopolis. That's the Egyptian gods. Geb is physical nature or material nature, and Nut is the expansive nature of space that holds the physical material nature itself. So Geb and Nut represent cosmic content. They personify the opposition between space and material in the universe. See, they characterize the nature of the universe in those terms, in these opposite terms. While they, and we're going back to the Enuma Elish now, line 11 in tablet 1 says, while they, meaning Lamu and La'amu, grew and increased in stature, so with their creative functions of the original zero, Ansar and Kisar are the next two gods who excelled them, were created. Ansar is Nut. It refers to space, and Kisar refers to material. In fact, I've got a description of what their names actually mean. Anshar or Kishar, or Ansar and Kisar. In Mesopotamian mythology, the male and female principles, the twin horizons of sky, that's cosmic space and earth or material nature, cosmic content, in other words. Anshar, also spelt Anshur, means sky pivot or sky axle, is a sky deity like Nut. It's a he this time, so the gender is reversed in Babylon from the Egyptian, because Nut is a female in Egyptian. He is the husband of his sister Kishar. Ki, notice the word ki, as in N-ki. Ki refers to the earth. Kishar may represent the earth as a counterpart to Anshar, the sky, if you're at the scale of the planet. But if you expand your scale to the whole universe, you're talking about material nature and space, and can be seen as the earth mother goddess. Her name also means whole earth. So now, instead of being a male with an enormous erection like Geb, who's making love with the sky, you've got the earth being represented by a feminine deity in this case. And the sky is now a male deity, because the sky associates with spirit nature, and spirit nature, because it impregnates material nature, there's a male-female association that's very natural, that you'd say, well, spirit is male. It's not. It's beyond male and female. But if we're going to use associations that we can relate to, we're going to refer to spirit as male and physical nature as female. And that's what they're doing originally in Babylon. So there we have the first 6 gods of the Babylonian pantheon from the Enuma Elish, matching precisely the same gods in pairs as the myth of Heliopolis. They are literally point for point. It's the same story. There's no distinction apart from a reversal of gender here and there. You know, it goes on to say they prolonged their days, they multiplied their years. That's like saying time came into existence. They multiplied their years. Yeah, that's cosmic time. Then it goes on and introduces more people. Anu, their son, could rival his father's. Anu means the sky, the scale of the earth. When we look up into the sky, that is Anu. The sun, you see, so a planet is being spoken of as being the offspring of cosmic content, as if a planet is very important. Of course, that's where creatures with intellect grow. We do not grow on stars. We're not walking around on the sun.
No, we don't walk on the sun.
Yeah, so that's just a stage in the process of creation that produces something that's useful. Now that we're at the useful state or stage, it's highlighting it. And it's referring to the sky of the earth as Anu, or Anum. Originally, An was a divine personification of the sky, king of the gods, an ancestor of many of the deities in ancient Mesopotamian religion. Anu is commonly represented or depicted with the symbol of the bull, especially by the Akkadians and Babylonians. Anu is most associated with the creation of the other gods, or the Anunnaki, who are descendants of the sky and earth. So there's a little reference to the unification of sky and ground is what happens at equinox at sunrise. You see, the sun rises between the ground and the sky. Right. The point of sunrise is between the two, and that's the risen angel. As we mentioned earlier, the Sphinx is looking to the east for the rising sun. Right. Yeah. And that when it does rise on equinox, because there's equal day and night, it's equality of upper and lower. Unifying dual opposites is what produces angel nature and ascension. So it's metaphorically referring to ascension. The bull or Taurus constellation represents physical nature as a creature. It's enormous. The Taurus in the sky is absolutely enormous. It takes up a lot of space.
Nice.
So you could refer to it in those terms, and we are talking about a physical sky, and that's a physical beast. It represents physical nature. If we compare with Orion next to it, Orion is basically Marduk, the conquering hero, the guy who kills the bull. He overcomes his physical nature and becomes spiritualized as an angel. There's the idea that's going on. Imagine the sky at night. There is an aspect of Anu. You see, our personal objective sky is Anu in Babylon, and you can personify that and start talking about it as if it's a hero of myth. Right. And Anu beget Nudi-Mud. That's the rational being, his own equal. Well, our head is referred to as the element air and considered to be equivalent in association and correlation with the sky, because thinking is ethereal, it's not physical. is it? The sky is empty, seemingly transparent, very much like our mind. So Nudimud is a way of referring to or figuring or personifying rational beings. Nudimud was the champion among his fathers. Well, now the human being is the one who effectively is going to leverage ascension and salvation. So he is the champion. He's the champion amongst all the things that have come before, because they can't do that. You see, only the person can do that with God. Profoundly discerning, wise, of robust strength. Now that characterizes an angel. So they're really jumping ahead and giving you the main points of creation to the point of leading you into the principle of salvation before it actually occurs in the text. In Sumerian, Nudimud, that's the rational being, the personification of rational beings, meant begetter of mankind. You see, so there's a connection to mankind. It refers to us, mankind, and was another name for the god Enki. Now, you remember Enki is associating with Osiris and Thoth, who both associate with angelic nature. So this text is referring to angelic nature.
Okay.
In the East Semitic language, Enki's name was Ea. It's the same personification. In West Semitic, including Hebrew, it was Aya or Yah. See, Ea. When you pronounce Ea, E-A, you get Yah, which gives us Yahweh.
Yahweh.
The beginnings of Yahweh. So it's Yah. So Lord Enki is Yahweh. In other words, you're being told about the result of a rational being using their intellect to become an angel. And it has to be understood there are three different kinds of sky. The sky we see during the day is the atmosphere of the earth, which will be called An. The sky at night, or cosmic space, which is Nut, or Asar, or Ashar, in Egyptian and Babylonian. And then the spiritual sky of the Nu, known as the abyss, giving us Anu, meaning spiritual sky of the abyss. You see, so the sky of the earth,
it's like a transformation, so to speak, what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like a step down. So the original is the abyss. The next one is cosmic sky, which is space. And then you have earth, at the scale of the rational being, the sky of the earth, the planet they're on. There's three different kinds of sky in these texts. You have to be able to distinguish between these. People in the past did distinguish between these identities. They weren't stupid. You know, they're not a bunch of childish idiots writing gibberish. You feel me? Which is what the impression you get.
What most people think it is today.
Yeah, there's no gibberish in this text at all. So he had no rival among the gods, his brothers. That's the angel. The divine brothers came together. The divine brothers, there's the issue of the twin again that we find with Thomas and Jesus. They always talk about this because the cloud of the angel is dual. It's a single object, but it's the unification of what's physical with what's spiritual. So it can be referred to as twin brothers, the cloud. And therefore the whole personification can become twin brothers of an angel. Cain and Abel is a story of becoming an angel. See, they all correlate and associate with each other for this reason. Their clamor, notice that now we have creation, their clamor got loud, throwing Tiamat into a turmoil. So we're talking about energy, the nature of energy. They jarred the nerves of Tiamat, who is at zero in perfect peace and stillness.
Right.
See, creation in comparison to that is nothing but turmoil and motion and energetic movement. And by their dancing, they spread alarm in Andaruna. Andaruna means the abode of An. I've just explained there are three kinds of An or sky.
Sky.
From the root, Daruna means abode. So Andaruna is the abode of An, which is the sky, the cosmic sky in this case. So that their clamor got loud, throwing Tiamat into turmoil, refers to the origin, but it's telling us about galactic swirls. It's telling us about how stuff is made in the universe, because you can see galaxies.
Right.
You see what I mean? They knew about galaxies. If you look at the cosmogony of the Hindu myth, that disk world, so-called, represents a galaxy, not a planet. So people now think that in the past they said the Earth was flat. Here is their model of the flat Earth. No, that's the galaxy. Earth is a spherical ball.
Oh, right.
You need to get your head round reality, actual reality, and not start inventing things and pretending that that's correct, because that's never going to work.
No, because I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I was looking at some of his stuff yesterday, but I was looking at some other stuff. I was all over the place yesterday looking at things like, from a gentleman who's now passed away, the alphabet that changed the world, which is Stan Tennant. And his, they both were together. I'm trying to think of the other guy. I always forget his name for some reason. He's an older guy. They were based at the University of California, I think at Berkeley, is what I recollect. But they exchanged ideas, so to speak. But anyway, I'm kind of going to digress. I don't want to do that. So, but yeah, continue on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
One thing I want to say, there are conversations going on, but I really basically want Phil to explain all this before we even actually ask questions with Phil. I meant to say that earlier, but I forgot. So if you got questions, we can ask those later. But I want Phil to explain what this is all about, because this is all of this is new to me in the ways that he's explaining this whole deal with Enuma Elish. So just be patient. Thank you. Go ahead.
So it goes on to suggest that something has to be done about this turmoil. It's too noisy. The comparison is too great. Some kind of redemption has to come. And they personify it as if Tiamat, the original condition, has an issue with what is going on. So really, the idea of creation and reality is being turned into a movie with personifications that we can relate to in all these texts. They all do the same thing. So we can relate to it to begin with, and start to personify natural functions and features of objective reality. It goes on to explain that Apsu opens his mouth and addresses Tiamat about the situation. So it's personifying how the origin.
He opens his mouth. It's kind of interesting. Like he's
you hear the same thing in Gnostic texts when they call him Yaldabaoth, and he claims to be the only god, and by doing so he generates creation. So when it says he opened his mouth and blasphemed, it's right. Literally that's a metaphor for from that condition comes creation.
Right.
They want silence to reign and sleep to be available to them again, because the original situation or condition has been turned into the turmoil of the cosmos. When you plant a seed and it grows into the tree, you no longer have the seed, you've only got the tree, and the tree is all about motion and transformation and development. It's the same thing with the cosmos, and there's a complaint about that because it hasn't returned to its perfect stillness yet. Yeah, so when Tiamat heard this,
that goes all the way. Everything to deal with that would be something to do with chaos. Everything's in turmoil, so to speak.
It's considered chaotic, creation.
Yeah. It's not what it was at the beginning, so to speak. Even though there was nothing, somewhat, in reality, because it all was so supposedly spoken by the word, and it revealed everything created, so to speak. So, but now it's chaotic. Everything's everywhere. It's like, why do we have trees? Anyway, I'm sorry.
So in line 45 in Tablet 1, Tiamat then says, how can we destroy what we have given birth to? You see, so they're telling you, they're admitting to you that original condition has given birth to the universe, and now that you're stuck with the universe, you can't destroy it. You're stuck with it. So there has to be a solution to retain or regain that original peace, to bring back the pristine paradise.
Well, you also look at simply when you said this, you had first what we call at first was being at peace, not in turmoil. Then you create something and it becomes chaos. Then that means simply there has to be another logical step here to get to that area. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was because we know in somewhat in our back of mind, even if we even don't go to church or such and such or whatever, there has to be a reason why we're here on this planet. There has to be a purpose. There has to be, why are we here? You see. So there is what I would call a forward thinking in some ways, that there has to be what I would call, for lack of a better word, some type of heaven or some type of just world or something of that nature. In why we're, in reality, we don't see that. We think something has to be created, but in reality, the change must take place for ourselves. You see, also. You see. Anyway, I don't know if I'm going off tangent off here or not. So
no, that's fine. That's fine.
So logically to me simply is that something that starts as being still, and then something takes, in other words, you come from a, so to speak, perfect world, so to speak, but when now you come to the area of what I would call chaos, you're no longer in that so-called perfect world, so to speak. So which means that simply is we came from a spiritual, not from the spiritual world, we come from, what's the word I'm trying to think of it right in my mind?
A primordial condition, if you like.
Right. And then we're put here. And suddenly you're like, why are we here for? What is our purpose? And then you're asked questions. You're like, why am I here? Why am I with this particular family? Why did I go to church? What's going on here? But no one asks these sort of questions to understand simply is there is a purpose why you're here in this chaotic situation. Because you've got to find peace in your life. You're looking for that because everything around you seems to be chaotic. And it's very clear, even more in the last 20, 30 years of our lives around us, how chaotic it's been. But it doesn't mean it's, you see what I'm saying?
More profoundly, the lack of stability in life concerns the fact that death is out of your control.
Right. That's the deal.
You cannot control death.
I was thinking about that this morning.
Yeah,
you don't know you're going to die, but you're going to die.
You haven't got. That means you haven't got control over that. So the principle going on here about salvation is gaining control over that. That is what becoming an angel. That's the consequence of becoming an angel. It is gaining control and stability, which is what is being discussed in this text. It then goes on and talks about how Enki or Ea effectively is the wisdom idea. The wisdom idea achieves victory over its foes, and it introduces this idea through Enki at the moment. After Enki had bound and slain his enemies on behalf of Tiamat, he achieved victory over his foes. He rested quietly in his chamber. He called it Absu. See, Absu again is the cloud, as we spoke just a few moments ago, whose shrines he appointed, where then he founded his living quarters within it. See, heaven is now your home. So it's telling you about the idea of an angel making heaven that is now their home. And Ea and Damkina, his wife, an angel is a unification of male and female within the individual as well. So you have a unification between Ea and Damkina, his wife. There's an explanation of what Damkina means. I'll tell you in a moment. Who sat in splendor in the chamber of the destinies. That's one way of referring to the zero condition that everything comes from. All destinies come from this place. The room of the archetypes. It's also the foundation of all archetypes in terms of shape and form and what comes in creation. The wisest of the wise. That's right. Jesus Christ is the wisest person there is in personification, like Thoth, the sage of the gods. It actually says this. Bel, or Christ, was conceived. See, salvation. In Apsu was Marduk born. Marduk is the savior. In pure Apsu was Marduk born. Pure Apsu is the refinement of Tiamat. So, have I already read that to you? Yeah, I have. So Ea, or Thoth, in terms of Thoth, the idea of wisdom, has his father begat him. That's Marduk. Ea begat Marduk. Damkina is his mother. Definitions of Damkina as a noun: Babylon, earth goddess, consort of Ea and mother of Marduk. The name Damkina translated to true wife, and is believed to be a reference to Ninhursag's marriage to Enki, the masculine god of creation. Damkina was primarily known as a mother goddess and is often associated with earth and fertility. So fertility in religious terms often or usually relates to the production of the cloud of heaven, because that proves that you are fertile and that God has made love with you.
Right. Interesting.
So it's introduced the idea of redemption already, and likewise, this text goes around in cycles. Every time it reproduces the cloud, it calls it something new and something different. In the same way to most texts, like Revelation does that 7 times. So it's talking about the sun god, the sun god of the gods. He was clothed with the aura of the 10 gods. That's the tree of life. So exalted was his strength. The 50 dreads were loaded upon him. 50 is the number in the Hebrew alphabet referring to fish, which is the angel, the conqueror. So we're talking about the exalted position and what that means.
So you're telling me that basically even the number 50 represented something back then also with this language?
Yeah. We mentioned earlier the rising sun at equinox facing down the Sphinx as the angel in the cloud. The Sphinx is the cloud. This rising sun is the angel. In that position, the angel can be associated with the number 50. Because they're like a fish in the ocean of the abyss. When you're in the abyss, you're like a fish in an ocean, a bottomless ocean. So you have a comparison to a fish, which is 50, the number 50 in the Hebrew alphabet, which is the letter Nun, N, the one after M, which means water. So water and fish come one after the other. It talks about how he delivered them to him. My son, let them whirl. He formed dust and set a hurricane to drive it. It's talking about creation again. It's going round in circles, this text, because we've already heard about the generation of cosmic material. And now we're hearing about it again, because it's arrived at Marduk already, who's the savior. And of course, that is a zero condition again. So creation starts from there. And it uses that cycle to tell the story. They always do this. All of them do this. It seems to be a normal thing to do to contain that information of the cycle.
Let me ask you a quick question here before I forget.
Yeah.
Is this the first text that lays it out? Is there another text from the past, even before the Babylonians did this?
I don't know. I think the Enuma Elish and Babylonian epics are considered to be some of the oldest in the world, I think.
So this would come before anything to do with the Eastern religions or Eastern perspective?
I was just about to say, if we're going back 4,000, 5,000 years, if the Chinese culture claims to be 5,000 years old, we're talking about the same kind of origin as the Chinese culture, which is probably the oldest one that they're still going as it is, as it were, from ancient times. So it's akin to the early Chinese culture as well.
I was just curious, but I was kind of curious that in some ways, did they themselves, the Babylonians, invent this, or did they, quote unquote, borrow something from somewhere else, so to speak. That's what I was trying. I'm trying to get what I would call to the root of where this began, so to speak. Also, so I'm just speculating because simply is, was it in the East, so to speak, or was it somewhere else, such and such? But a long time ago, we talked about it earlier. A long time ago, we was talking. You mentioned something that always stands out. There are pyramids all over the world. So obviously, there were that knowledge was trying to be, or the wisdom was trying to be spread even back then, long ago. Now I don't know how old those pyramids are. You see, there are some in Mexico. There's some in South America, which you told me is many of them, thousands of them, tons of them. And everyone thinks that it's some place of. Some people think it's all to do with quote unquote some type of worship took place there, but but in reality, you see it simply as, if I understand correctly, it's symbolic of what you're supposed to be pursuing in your life to the single point. You see, at the top.
That's right. That's right. It represents our function. The purpose of being here represents that.
Right.
It tells you. But in the old days, back 5,000 years ago, it was far more normal to have this stuff floating around. The ancient world was basically focused on it as a source of intellectual endeavor, as it were. In the center of any community would be a pyramid, which represents that intellectual endeavor, and the divine endeavor.
Right.
And it would have been normal back then, but not everyone would have been, initiated.
Not everyone would have been quote unquote, spiritually adept or understood this. I understand that, but I'm just saying simply that was a symbol. It was a symbol that somehow, in particular certain areas of everywhere it was there, to represent something. And we have this idea. People think that simply this is where they worship at, such and speak, or there's where they buried their people at, or whatever. And it's like, okay, but that's not. I don't think that's the major point here. It was a symbolic symbol for man to eventually move and construct something that would build within himself to get to the toppest part of who he is, which is actually, our heads. That's the highest part, the air, the ether, so to speak. So anyway, I kind of didn't want to do this. But I had a question I want to ask, so I was going to forget it or not.
Yeah. But that's pretty much it. I mean, later on in I think it's tablet 5 at the moment. You are Marduk, our avenger. We have given you kingship over the sum of the whole universe. In other words, they're really encapsulating the totality of reality as it was known back in the day. The fact that it comes from zero, it goes to zero again, and everything to do with that is in the Enuma Elish, without a doubt. To me, they knew exactly what they were talking about. They know what they're doing. It's a great recording. It's very poetic. As I said, it comes from an earlier Sumerian poem, apparently. And it just goes on to establish that the redemption is the purpose and function of bringing peace back to the turmoil of creation. You see, and that there's a lot of exaltation in the last 3 tablets. Marduk, you're this, you're that, you're wonderful, isn't it great? It sounds like the exaltation of Jesus Christ in many of the books in the New Testament.
That's not right.
It really does. It reads very much like that. It's a continual praising. And I've got a list at the back of this book of the full meaning of all the names of these gods and what have you, as a sort of reference.
So this information is coming from a book, is what you're saying?
Well, most of the information associated with these names and people are pretty well known, and they're available. You just Google these things and they'll tell you. I mean, they can't tell you about the cloud of heaven, right, and the true association and where they come from, but you can certainly get a good idea of what's going on if you know about it.
Okay, but I was thinking you said book. I didn't know if you meant you had a book in your hand you were reading out of, so to speak. You're reading.
I am reading. This is the book I'm compiling about the Enuma Elish. I just want to say about sacred numbers as well, because there's a lot to do with that in these texts. It says Anu was represented by the number 60, Enlil, who is the brother of Enki, by the number 50, which is the fish idea again, the angel. and Enlil represents redemption as well. Ea is represented by the number 40, which is the number for water. And Enki, that's Enki. Enki is the Lord of water. He associates with water, and water is truth, like Thoth. So Enki represents a Babylonian version of Thoth. You see, by the association with the number as well. There's lots of different numbers associated with these gods, and different things like the heavenly king of the east holds a lute, the heavenly king of the south holds a sword, of the west he holds a snake, and the king of the north holds a club. Well, that's pretty much like Vishnu, or I think it's Vishnu, in the waters of the abyss. He's asleep. He's holding 4 objects. There's a club, there's a mace, there's this, there's that, there's a conch shell. All these things are basically from the 4 elements. It contains the information of creation and creativity associated with this zero condition. So it really does revolve around the same subject whenever you talk about these things, whether it's numerical, poetic, intellectual, semantic, or whatever. It's all the same stuff. It's very, very repetitive, and once you get it, you recognize that.
Right.
Yeah, there's no question. So there's no issue about whether, Anunnaki are aliens. No, Anunnaki are effectively a way of referring to angels.
Unlike our popular writers these days that talk about other things.
So I'm an Anunnaki. I mean, go figure. But it's just a Babylonian way of referring to an angel, effectively, in association with the Tree of Life and its philosophy that is understood. So there's a pretty good breakdown of the Enuma Elish if you want one. It's a hero story that represents our journey to our own redemption. In a nutshell, that's it.
It is actually the true hero, period, meaning simply is that the one who eventually is divided and becomes singularity.
Yes, exactly. As you become one, you become singular, you become spiritual. That's right. You ascend and overcome everything physical by seeing through it and seeing what's behind it, and you get to know it so well that it becomes a commodity for you to sort of use for your own benefit. You become, as I said before, you become the chef who makes the dishes from raw materials.
Right.
You become the skillful one, the knowledgeable one. You become Thoth, or you become Ea, or you become Enlil, or Marduk.
So you can deal with, we say simply is that if you're as a chef, you deal with all the chaos and actually create something spectacular. Actually, something that you actually to actually feed yourself and eat, but it would be spiritual food. It would be
which takes education and refinement. Right. Yeah, same principle as with spiritual material. You become refined over your understanding of objective reality. Yeah.
Now, do you want to continue on, or do you want to?
Well, it's already been an hour and a half. I didn't realize it had gone so far.
Hour and 23 minutes, according to my according to these guys here on the recording this. So I don't know.
That was super fast, by the way. I feel like I've been talking for about 10 minutes. I do. I really do. I think 10 minutes has gone by, and it's an hour and a half. That's really
well. I guess that's a subject you enjoy talking about. That's why you enjoy it. It goes by so quickly. If it was, humdrum, so to speak, guess what? It would be forever. It's like, wow, I'm doing this thing and doing this. It's great. It should be 2 o'clock here. In my time. Your time would be 6 o'clock at night, so to speak. So, but anyway, So
okay.
So what I was going to say simply is that anybody out there in the audience that wants to ask a question, they're welcome to ask questions now. Is that okay with you, Phil?
Yeah. I mean, I think I should stop.
Okay.
I do have things to sort out.
Okay. So when you say stop, you want to end the recording? What you're saying?
Yeah. But unless somebody is desperate to ask something, but I don't know.
Let's see if anybody's got. I'm going to look at the questions here. I've got a index here. had someone here said,
There's someone here called Mr. Anthrope.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he or she. I'm taking it to he. He seems to know what he's talking about.
right,
Yeah, the sea monster. Marduk is sorry, Tiamat is referred to as a sea monster. She's thought of in those terms because the abyss is an open ocean, and in the
right,
abyss is the cloud. But in its ignorant state, like Yaldabaoth, it can be taken as a sea monster.
right, right. Literal.
Um,
So you have the
yeah,
questions right in front of you too.
yeah, I can see.
Good.
When you
Okay.
click on comments, you've got Mr. Anthrope.
Okay.
So PTL Media now at 3:09 said, so Enki is Yahweh. Effectively, you can say that. Yeah, I mean, there are slight variations on associations with these gods. As I said, is it Ea? Enki can be separated in Egypt into Osiris and Thoth. You can do that. So there's two different personifications of one being in the original Babylonian write-ups.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're just going to directly transpose one god onto another between cultures, you might have to forget about a couple of their attributes to do that, because different gods are associated with different attributes. But effectively, Enki or Ea is effectively Yahweh. Yeah,
Right.
that's right. They are the same, basically. Yeah. Yeah. So there.
Mine rolls. Mine rolls. Sorry. Go ahead. You gonna say something?
No, that's it.
Yeah, on my computer here, I have to move this thing up and down, like so to speak, and they only give you a little window here. You can see something, which irritates me. Why don't you got all this other crap in front of me? And it's like I don't want to see that. It's just like Anyway,
Yeah.
I was going to ask you before I leave here. When you and the guy in not Scott, what's his name? Used to meet the guy from Minnesota.
Oh, is it Steve?
Steve. Yeah, he used another type of deal like we're doing now, which I'm using StreamYard. But like I said,
I think it was Zoom. I think.
Yeah, it was Zoom. So I understand simply. I looked a little bit in Zoom, so to speak, and it's like, as far as I know, depending on how many people watch it, it's basically doesn't cost you hardly anything, zero. I think it's free, unless you have
I
a
think
massive
it is. Yeah.
So I misunderstood. So I'm kind of frustrated with this one here, simply like I said, it's $45 a month. Okay, which to me, what it once was $25 a month.
Yeah,
okay?
It's all gone up. That's right.
So that's a massive climb to me. It's like it's not worth it. It's not what. So I mean, you can also, I noticed Zoom. You reveal a lot of times on with Steve. You can actually go back to some of the things you actually have. You downloaded whatever pictures of what Egyptian gods were who, such and such, da 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 da, and explain that. And use graphs and stuff like that. You can't do this with the system. You see,
right?
Or if it is, it's not up. You might be able to do it. I may not be, but anyway. I'm kind of going off the tangent here.
Yeah.
So, are you saying that you are planning to do another book with this particular subject, or are you thinking about another book somewhere else?
It's literally called I'm doing this book about the Enuma Elish. It's called Enuma Elish When on High. It'll be finished in about, I don't know, a couple of weeks probably, and it'll be freely available as usual for download, so you can understand the Enuma Elish yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty much it.
I appreciate your time today.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate you asking.
You're welcome. You may can try something next week. You let me know what's good. We'll go from there. The person who actually asked this question from last week or the week before, I guess it was 2 weeks ago. That's why I went to him, and he's not here today. So.
Right.
But he might be doing something today, or he may be forgotten, whatever. because he's the one that asked about this whole question, such and such. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this, which I still don't know anything a lot about it. So I got to rewatch what I've seen today. But
sure. That's right.
So I just want to tell you, thank you for being here.
Yeah, pleasure.
Don't go yet anyway. I'll just basically end the conversation here with us live. And then what I'll do is we'll talk real quick and then we'll let you go. So, okay. So hold on.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for being here. Hopefully Phil will be back sometime next week. And thank you for listening. Again, I'm on Facebook and I'm also on YouTube, Discerning What is True. Thank you.